Welcome to another episode of the Liberated Woman podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here again today. It is such a pleasure and an honor to have you in the space. Thank you to everyone who reviews, who likes, who shares my podcast on social media. It really does mean the world to me when you listen to my words and you resonate with them and you share them out into the world so that other people can hear them and liberate themselves too. Thank you so much. Every single one of you in my community is a beating heartbeat, and I am just so very grateful for that. If you are listening today and you're watching it on YouTube, please take a screenshot, post it on your stories, tag me at _ShaniBella on Instagram or on Facebook, share it with people that you know. It really does help to spread the word out to other people. And it really does mean the world to me. So in today's episode, this is a part 2 of an episode that I did a few weeks back about why rebirthing breathwork has really helped me in forging my path to wild liberation. And in the first episode, there was just so much to say that I decided to break it down into these 2 episodes. And in the first episode, I focused a lot on the birth script and what the birth script means and how it potentially affects your patterns of behavior and the way that you navigate your way through life. So if you haven't listened to that episode, perhaps go back and take a listen to that before you listen to this one, so that you get the context for what rebirthing breathwork is as a form of conscious connected breathing, and why I found it so powerful on my own remembrance journey, on my own healing journey, on my feminine awakening journey, and in forging my path to wild liberation, and why I now love to hold space for my clients in one-to-one breathwork sessions, in my online group sessions that are called Reclaim Your Sovereignty. And I'll explain why I named it that in a little bit, and how this kind of breathwork can really support you as a woman who is forging her path to her liberation and finding more trust in herself and in her body. So when I first went to a breathworker, I'd never even heard of breathwork. I was really early on in my what you might call spiritual awakening journey. I had been through quite a number of processes where I was understanding that the life that I had been living no longer felt in alignment for me. And that at that time, this was about 5 years ago now, at that time, I had been living in a post-traumatic stress response for around about 15 years of my life. And this was due to being in a really toxic, abusive relationship, both physically and emotionally abusive. And in the same year that I left that relationship and was already dealing with the fallout of that and having to take my ex-partner to court because I had him arrested for several things actually that he did to me. So I was already, like, my body was already struggling a lot. My nervous system already felt overwhelmed, frozen and shut down. And then I actually had a really bad car accident where they had to cut me out of the car. My car was a total write-off. I ended up in hospital. And actually, the story kind of continues, because this is the part I've never shared, actually, that when I went to the hospital, and they put me on morphine, I was just in so much pain. Something in my head just kept saying, like, you need to leave the hospital, you need to leave. And I actually discharged myself. And I had flights booked to New York to visit a friend. And I'd really wanted to go and visit this friend because I'd had such a shit year. Well, more than a shit year. I'd had a really shit 3 years. But this particular year was like the culmination of so much stuff just all bombarding me at once. And I foolishly was so stubborn at that time. I was like, I'm going on this trip to New York. And I told the airline, and I actually got wheeled onto the airplane in a wheelchair. I was in so much pain. I couldn't actually move my body. I was quite severely injured from this car accident and still dealing with the post-traumatic stress of the relationship too, which continued over the time I was in New York and when I got back to the UK, because he continued to harass me and threaten me and stalk me. And Then when I was in New York, I don't know if you remember this, several years ago, but there was a volcano that erupted in Iceland, which meant that all the flights from JFK were cancelled. So the day before I was due to fly back to the UK, my flight was cancelled and there was no way for me to get home. And I ended up actually going to stay with some family in Boston and eventually getting a flight out of there. But this whole time, obviously, I was like dealing with grief and dealing with the process of my trauma. And I was so deeply in a state of freeze response. I found it so difficult to make decisions, to express my voice. I definitely didn't have trust in my body. Like my actual body was so contracted and so tight. I couldn't dance, I couldn't move. And even now, as I'm talking to you, I can feel a tickle rising up in my throat. So I'm just going to take a sip of my tea because it's still bringing up at a cellular level memories of what was happening at that time. Like I'm visualizing it in my mind as I share parts of the story with you. And it's obviously just fractions of the story. It's not the full story. And so all of that was happening. And then when I was going through my awakening in 2018, which really doesn't seem that long ago when you think about it, I really realized at that point that I couldn't move my body and I was struggling to trust myself. I was struggling to trust my then partner. I was struggling to trust the world around me. I was carrying a lot of internalized rage and resentment and anger. And I didn't know how to express it. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to emote it or move that energy through because I was so frozen. And I was working with, you know, what you might call a spiritual coach or a spiritual mentor, a spiritual guide at the time. And she suggested to me that I go and see a breath worker. And I'd never, ever heard of breathwork. I had no idea what this was. Obviously, I knew what breathing was. I think hopefully we all know what breathing is because we do it automatically. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And when I went to my first session with my then breathworker, who I'm still in touch with, by the way, like we still message, we're actually in the same membership for something else now, which is really cool. Like we stayed in touch the whole time because she had such a deep impact and such a potent and powerful effect, a formative part of my journey into my awakening and my remembrance. And so when I first met her and I went to the breathwork session, we spent a good sort of 40 minutes to begin with, just talking and me sharing what was happening in my life and why I was struggling to move my body and my lack of trust and my inability to make decisions and my overgiving and my overworking. And at that time, I was so deeply in my wounded masculine because one of the things that my abusive ex used to say to me a lot was, you're selfish, you're manipulative, you're a bitch. Like those are the three things that on repeat he would say to me. And actually, I think the two that I took on most, like as a true belief in my body, was that I was manipulative and I was selfish. And I know that I'm neither of those things. But the selfish one really, really stuck with me. And so one of the things that I would do in kind of like to unconsciously prove that I wasn't selfish was to overgive. I literally would sign up for every volunteering opportunity possible. When I lived in Singapore, I set up charity events. I was running like fundraising events all the time. It was the same when I moved to Israel. I joined a volunteering organization. I would go volunteering pretty much every weekend on top of my full-time teaching job at the time and trying to fit into a new country and make friends and all the rest of it. And obviously this led to burnout, and it led to burnout several times. And I've experienced that burnout quite a number of times in my life. And it was like the realization that actually I was unconsciously overgiving because I wanted to prove to the world, I suppose, that I wasn't selfish, or even prove it to him, even though I had no contact with him anymore. But it really deeply lived in my cellular system. And so I was explaining all of this to her, and I laid down for the first breathwork session. She used something called transformational breath, which is a different type of breath work to the breath work that I facilitate. I facilitate rebirthing breath work, which is a very different style of breath work. And the effects are somewhat similar, but in both cases, they do access the type of conscious connected breathing that you are doing does access you at a cellular level, and it's bringing up memories that you have stored in the body. And so particularly if you are somebody who is living in a freeze response, or you've been frozen or shut down or silenced, or in a space where you've had to, freeze to protect yourself, you'll see it that in the animal kingdom, and I see it even with my cat Smudge, that when those animals experience some kind of trauma, like the gazelle or the impala, when they see the lion, they'll freeze, like in order to pretend that they're dead so that the lion doesn't come and get them. But then as soon as they feel that they're safe, they shake out their bodies. And I see my cat Smudge doing it. And if you have a cat or even a dog, like you'll see them shaking it out, right? Because they know how to move that energy through so that it doesn't stay stuck in their bodies. But humans don't do that. We do stay stuck. And I was very much in that space. I'd never shaken out any of the trauma. I'd just lived through these really horrendous flashbacks. There were points in my life where I deeply considered, like, why am I here? What am I doing on this earth at this time? Like it got pretty bad and pretty dark at points in my journey of recovery. And when I first tried the transformational breath, it was a conscious connected breath work. So breathing in and out without a pause between the inhale and the exhale. And when I started to first breathe with her, I realized that my body was having a physical reaction to the breath, but I wasn't able to still move my body. So my body would still stay in freeze. And it was like I was so contracted and so unable to trust and so unable to let go that my body continued to protect me and to keep me in this like contraption, in this freeze response. And it took about 4 sessions before I started to actually emote in the session. So I think it was around session 4 where I suddenly had an outburst of rage and I was able to release some tears and some noise. And we know that as women, we suppress our voice, we swallow it down, we've been silenced. I just did an episode on this podcast about, stay silent to stay safe, or speak out and maybe not be safe as a woman. And I explained an example of a specific situation that I just found myself in. And perhaps you can resonate with this idea of women, of you maybe suppressing your voice and swallowing it down. And so it felt like embarrassing at the time to let my voice come out. It was like, I'm not allowed to take up all this space. I'm a burden. I don't know, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to be wild? Am I allowed to express myself? And I've had clients that have expressed the same, like, it's okay for me to make noise and go wild. Like, I'm embarrassed that you're seeing this. And I always say to them, like, no, express as much as you can. You're so safe in this space, in my containers, to really let loose and let rip, like, let it out. Because when we hold on to it and we swallow it down, it breeds resentment and it breeds this anger that lives in the body but never gets expressed. And then that can lead to illness, like really serious illnesses too, because our body is holding on to something that it shouldn't. It's like energetically unclean. It's like not going to the toilet regularly, or not blowing your nose, or not sneezing, like we need to keep moving the energy. And so when I was in this breathwork session, I finally managed to emote. And I remember like the feeling of like, I'm a burden. I'm taking up too much space. I'm too loud. I'm too much. She can't handle it. What am I doing? And it was like that already raised so much awareness of some patterns that I was holding around being a burden. And it led back to work that I was doing around my dad, and my dad making me feel like I was a burden on his finances. And I was like taking up too much of his space and too much of his house and too much of his life. And it was just so interesting that over the course of the sessions that I had with her, more and more of these patterns were rising to the surface for me to be witnessed, for them to be witnessed, and for me to see it and then integrate that into my life. And I remember the first time that I released that anger, like it then didn't stop. Like it opened up some floodgates for me of like this what I would like to call holy rage that was so deeply held within my womb and my sacral. And I remember like during that week after the session, just like experiencing this wild rage and like wanting to punch the wall and just feeling so angry. But it's because I'd suppressed it for so long, especially because my abusive partner was so angry and so violent. And I'd shut down in order to protect myself. Like all of the rage and all of the anger that I felt towards that situation and what he did to me started to come out. And it was so powerful because for the first time in my life, I was using my voice to express in that way. And I wasn't ashamed of it anymore. I was like, no, I get to take up space and I get to have my voice be heard and I get to release this anger. And what was really underneath the anger was fear. Like I was scared. I was in a new relationship with somebody and I was scared to trust them. I was scared to open up to them. I was scared to be vulnerable with them. I was scared to share my heart and my life with them. And obviously, because I'd had such a difficult relationship and I'd had many other relationships in between that one and this one that I was experiencing at the time. And so the breath work really, really helped me to get back in touch with the trust in my body. That was the part that I was finding most difficult because I was so frozen. And when I started to surrender and allow the breath to take me on journeys, the amount of energy that started to move through me and the life force and then the ideas and the clarity and the creativity, it was honestly incredible, to the point where I was like, I know this is changing my life at a cellular level. Like I know that it's literally shifting the beliefs that I've been holding on to in my body. More than any talking therapy, I tried EMDR, which was pretty helpful. I think it stands for eye movement desensitization rapid, something along those lines. EMDR, look it up. That was like also a fairly somatic-ish type of therapy that I experienced. And I tried spiritual coaching, which was also cool. It was more meditative and journeying. But really, the somatic work, the work that got me out of my head and into my body and allowed me to move my body in ways that I'd not experienced before, that's where the alchemy started to happen. And I went to these sessions for, I think, around almost a year, to be honest, because I had so much to move through. And it led me to the journey of me saying, wow, this is such a gift. I want to gift this back. I want to go train. I want to hold people in these spaces. And now when I offer breathwork sessions, like they've transformed so much from when I first trained, and I've brought in my own gifts and my own abilities, and I channel light language and I move energy and I bring in sound healing and I sing to my clients and I use Reiki and I move energy around to help them release what it is they need to release. And the patterns that come up are so incredible because sometimes we just can't access it from talking, coming from the logical mind. And so many women, so many of you are so cerebral because you've had to be in order to try and succeed in this world, in order to keep up with the narrative of what the world expects us to be. We've had to really go into our mind. And of course, at school, people who go to school, it's all academic. It's all about the mind. It's all about results and exams and data. And they really don't teach you to be connected to your body in any way. You know, and I taught performing arts and drama for 16 years. And it was only really in those spaces that the kids got to come and experience what it was like to be connected to the body and to have confidence in using your body and your voice to express in a creative way. But other than that, there really is nothing in most mainstream schools, for sure, that really allows students and young people to connect to their intuition. They're told to move their bodies in a certain way and put their hands up and fold their arms and cross their legs and sit nicely, whatever that means. You know, like all these ridiculous, vague comments that teachers get told to tell their students. And actually what we should be teaching them is to feel into their bodies. What's going on in my body right now? What does this feel like for me? And then teaching them tools to regulate that, so that as adults, we don't have to be doing all this unlearning from all of the crap learning that we learned. And so I really just want to have such a huge shout out to the breath worker that took me through my journey, so that I can now offer this gift to you. It really is a transformative experience. And every time people come to me for a session, whether it's one-to-one or in group work, whether it's in person or online, they always come out with a new awareness and a new understanding about a part of themselves that they didn't necessarily know was there. And it's always incredible when specific memories or feelings come up in the body, and my client will say things like, wow, I didn't know I was still holding on to that. I didn't know I was still resentful about that. I didn't know that I still felt anger around that. I didn't know I was still grieving that. And, I think I remember in one of my breathwork sessions, there was an incident with my brother when we were younger. And as I was breathing, I could feel my hands like clenching into a fist. And the memory of that situation with my younger brother came up, and I could feel like, as I was remembering it, like my hands were literally turning into fists in anger. It was like the memory of holding on to the things that I never said at the time that left me feeling so angry and resentful of what he did and how I was treated in that situation. So it really is an incredible somatic experience. It really helps you to shift and move energy in a way that is just so powerful and transformative, and allows you to have a sense of awareness of where you're holding on to things in your body, the pain that you might experience, old injuries, old grief, anger, fear. And then as you move through the roots, like I always say to my clients, it's like we go deep into the roots. We have to, if we had a garden bed, in order to lay new seeds and watch them flourish and grow, we first need to take out the roots. And that can take quite a lot of time, because we hold on to those roots as our anchor, right? We hold on to them because it feels safer than to expose them, reveal them, and take them out, because that means that we have to be a new version of ourselves. And that can be really scary. And so as we do that, we are literally taking out the roots, clearing the space, so then we can plant new seeds and watch them grow. And then from watching them grow, we can then start to get visions and clarity and understanding. And this is the incredible thing around this breath work, that it will take you on that journey until you get to the point where you're like, okay, oh, I feel calmer now. I feel more nourished. I feel to have more clarity. I feel more alive. I feel more connected. I trust my body more. I trust other people more. I trust the world around me more. I have more energy, more vitality. Like, who doesn't want all those things? I do. And I'm sure you do too. So I just wanted to share that part of my journey with the breath work with you today. And I think I'll get some clients or former clients to come on and do some podcast episodes with me to share their experience with it too, so that you can hear from them what they experienced during their time in the container with me. I'm currently opening up 2 spaces for one-to-one clients to work with me. And in those one-to-one sessions, we use a blend of breath work, rebirthing breath work, ancestral healing, shamanic work, energy work, to first of all get to the roots of what's happening for you, whether it's in this lifetime or from past lifetimes. And then as we journey on, we get to reveal your birth script, look at how you came into the world, how that's affecting the patterns of behavior, the way you're navigating your way now. And then from that, we get to start digging out the roots from the very core, so that we can plant new seeds and watch you flourish and gain clarity and visions and ideas of where you're at, and so that you can move forward in your life. And it's truly a beautiful journey. And I'll be opening up spaces for that from January. So if you are interested, I will put a link in the show notes for you to book in for a call with me, an alchemy call, to see if we're the right fit to work together. I only take on clients who are self-responsible, committed, and ready to do this work. I do not take on clients who are flaky. I do not take on clients who are desperate. And I don't take on clients who are not willing to put in the work in between the sessions to integrate the learnings, to then see it happening in their outer reality. So self-responsibility is a real key aspect of what I look for in the clients that I work with, because honestly, if you don't take that self-responsibility and you think that it's all on the facilitator to heal you, you're coming at it from a totally wrong perspective. The healer, the breathwork facilitator, the coach, the shaman, whoever it is, we're here to hold you and guide you and be the vessel. And I love to do that for you. But I'm not here to fix you because you're not broken. And in between the sessions, you then need to be self-responsible for integrating all of the awakenings, the remembrances, and what you are learning so that you can start to implement it into your life and see your outer reality shift and change as you do the work in your inner reality. So I'm going to post the link for that in my show notes. I also have monthly group sessions that you can participate in. They are online, so you can come as you are. Earlier, I said I would explain why I call it Reclaim Your Sovereignty, because I truly believe that when we breathe in this way, you are accessing something that already lives inside of you, and that's your breath. That's your life. It's the first thing you do when you come into this world is take a breath. And it's the last thing that you'll do when you leave this world is take a breath. And in between, we forget to breathe. We forget to breathe. And when you connect back to your breath, you are literally reclaiming your sovereignty, because you are getting to rewrite the script, recode the beliefs and the stories, literally shift yourself at a cellular level and evolve into the person that you were always meant to be. And it is so beautiful when you can stand in your power and say, I am sovereign and I am free. And may all beings be sovereign and free. I really look forward to hearing from you. If you like this episode, please share it. Tag me on Instagram at @Shanibella_Shanibella, or Facebook. Share it with your friends. Share the link with the people that you think you might know in your network that could really benefit from hearing these episodes. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into an episode of The Liberated Woman. I look forward to tuning in again with you next week.